Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good Tuesday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service, here with you again on the 20th of December, just a few hours actually away from winter solstice. That'll occur in the middle of the night around the 1 o'clock hour on the 21st, so after you go to bed tonight probably. And after that, just 6 more months until the days start getting shorter again, right? No. Of course, we look at it a little more optimistically than that, starting tomorrow with increased daylight for many areas. 800-472-0391. You can get your weather information there, as well as a climate summary for your location. And many locations across Alaska will also feature the sunrise and sunset times if you're interested in that. Weather.gov/Alaska is a place to start for the statewide view, but you can always narrow down your view to the Anchorage, Fairbanks, or Juneau weather forecast offices there in the surrounding region. And if you'd like to email us anytime, a weather picture, a weather question, or a question or comment about the show, we'll happily receive them and reply to them anytime. nws.ar.tvweather@noaa.gov. No watches, warnings, or advisories to talk about today, but we will talk about more than a few lightning strikes with this weather system here out across the central and eastern Gulf that were approaching southeastern Alaska earlier today. I think we counted something on the order of 18 or so. Around the western outer coast during the afternoon. So fairly active and vigorous system as this worked across the central and eastern Gulf earlier today. Now the best opportunity for lightning will probably be along the outer coast over the next 24 hours or so as the system is still moving eastward. Across the interior, temperatures are fairly mild considering where they have been for the last couple weeks or so. Snow was falling around the Fairbanks region earlier today, and several waves of that were kind of stacked up to the west and southwest. As of the last report, it looked like there was about a foot of snow in Fairbanks, and considering recent winters, that's probably a welcome sight for many of you there in the Golden Heart City. Across the north, looks like we're still dealing with more of that northerly flow that's working its way, kind of oozing its way onto the Chukchi Seacoast. There's another front behind that northwesterly flow that will reinforce some colder air and that northwesterly push. So we're still watching for some of that higher concentration ice to move southward toward north-facing communities there around Shishmaref, Wales, Cape Espenberg, and up across the Chukchi Seacoast itself. So just remember that the ice that is in place now is probably going to still be on the move over the next several days there as that northerly wind picks up just a little bit more. Ice is also on the move across the northern part of Cook Inland. In fact, very close to Calgon Island, if not touching Calgon Island at this point. We'll have a look at the sea ice update here in just a little bit. In the meantime, the low pressure across the southern Bering Sea has kind of fizzled out and filled in, and now we have several waves of low pressure across the Gulf, across south central, across southwest, and way out west across the Bering. So a lot going on, but in a lot of different places than it has been for the last several days. Here's a look at the map, and low pressure is responsible for those thunderstorms that we saw very close to southeast today, periods of rain and even heavy rain across southern sections of the Panhandle today. Heidelberg made it up to about 44 degrees. Yakutat had about 1 inch of rain, and all of that associated with that low pressure system across the central and eastern Gulf. We've got a wave of low pressure across just south of the Kenai Peninsula and to about Sand Point and even further south there. It's kind of representing a new change in the weather pattern. We've got northerlies behind it and slightly colder and drier air, and it seems to be stuck around Prince William Sound. Had some wet weather there as well today. Plenty of pockets of passing snow across the interior, some of that again passing over Fairbanks throughout the day. Some light snow around the Norton Sound region as well as Kotzebue Sound, Kotzebue itself, as well as the northwest coast. Then we have 2 waves of low pressure across the north slope. Each one of those is allowing a little bit of fog to form in between it, and low pressure across the western Bering at 1,000 millibars. For tonight, that wave out west won't move a whole lot, but it may kick up some rain and snow showers for the central and western chain. A better chance for rain and thunderstorm activity. Though isolated, it may present a problem if you're out there on the water for the central and eastern Gulf. Better chance for just plain old rain showers for southeast and higher terrain snowfall. Snow will be possible around the Copper River Basin and the higher terrain around Prince William Sound, and also across the western Alaska Range, snaking along the boundary that stretches into the interior, over Fairbanks and Arctic Village, as well as places like Eagle in the upper Yukon Valley, and the eastern Beaufort Seacoast. Don't be surprised to see some fog and flurries there. That new wave coming into the northwest will start to make its way to the Chukchi Coast. As it does so, a better chance for some snow there, stretching all the way down through the Bering Strait. And once again, that's going to help usher in a little bit more of a northerly flow. As that front creeps slowly southward, it's running into a kind of a slowdown mechanism here. This is a ridge of high pressure that stretches all the way up to the north slope. As that air becomes a little more stable, it may break up the clouds a little bit. So as the days gradually get longer in the coming days, being the solstice tomorrow, you might see a glimpse of the sun, at least for a few more minutes, as more clouds have taken over more real estate lately. Low pressure across the western Bering at 999 millibars should keep some rain and snow showers across the Bering and maybe the central and eastern Aleutians, as well as the Pribilofs, St. Lawrence Island, St. Matthew Island, and at times flirting with parts of the Seward Peninsula, Wales, Tin City, out toward Nome as well. And once again, as we get into Thursday, you'll notice that weather system up north is just creeping eastward. Really not a whole lot of headway very quickly at all. High pressure will continue across the interior, anywhere from about 1,017 to 1,018 millibars from north to south. And we still have our friend out here in the eastern Gulf. The low pressure system really hasn't gone anywhere, and will still be sloshing rainfall into southeast with periods of snow and rain very close to some of the communities there, but a lot of that probably hanging at higher terrain. So you'll see it, you might smell it, but it probably won't be on your sidewalks, if not for very long. Low pressure across the northern Pacific at 982 millibars starts to creep into our weather picture here. If you look very carefully, there's another ridge, kind of the southern extension of the ridge across the mainland that's sitting across the North Pacific and the western Gulf. So this is probably going to hold us back, and chances are it's going to take a dip south and move out of the way. So probably not expecting much from that at the moment. Now, here's a look at current temperatures this afternoon. We saw readings in the 30s and 40s today. Again, Heidelberg, one of the warmer spots at 44 degrees. Sitka, 43 degrees, 37 around the capital city, 40 around Haines, 37 in Skagway. We saw temps in the 20s and 30s around Prince William Sound. Valdez, only 25 today, but Anchorage colder at 18. 30 for Homer, 26 around Seward. Up around Talkeetna, it was 27. Puntillo is 7 degrees. It was about 14 below in Tok with 2 in Northway, 25 for Eagle, and 1 below in Fairbanks, again with some much needed and much appreciated snow, I imagine. 1 above in Fort Yukon this afternoon as you look toward the north slope. Temps from Point Barrow eastward were at or below 0 today. Down the Chukchi Coast from Wainwright all the way down to Point Hope and Point Lay and into the Kotzebue Sound. Temps are in the single digits, even the teens. 12 in Shishmaref, 2 in Nome, 19 around Wales and Tin City. Savunga had 19 degrees as well. Unalakleet was 11, 4 in Galena. Tanana was 6. McGrath, 6 degrees as well, 7 in Bethel. And looks like many areas around Lake Iliamna were probably in the upper 20s for a good part of the day. Ammonok and Nunivak Island in the lower 20s. Kodiak was 35. The Alaska Peninsula saw temps in the mid to upper 30s. St. Paul and St. George very close to freezing today on Alaska and Dutch Harbor, 36. 37 in Adak and Shemya reported at 33. Overnight low temperatures north of the Alaska Range will stay sub-zero tonight, 12 below in Fort Yukon, 18 below for Anaktuvuk Pass, and 5 to 15 below for the North Slope. Kotzebue Sound temperatures anywhere from about 5 below to 5 above for most places. Nome, Unalakleet, about 0 to 5 below. 7 below around McGrath, Southwest, and Bristol Bay in the lower to mid-teens. Bethel, 1. 28 in Kodiak, 20s and 30s for the Chain and the Alaska Peninsula. Upper 30s for most of Southeast, and South Central will stay in the low to mid-teens with Prince William Sound in the 20s. High temperatures tomorrow in the Prince William Sound region back in the lower 30s for many areas. Valdez and Whittier might be a little bit colder. 30s and 40s for Southeast. Kodiak Island, 33. 30s and 40s for the Alaska Peninsula as well as the Chain. 21 around Nunivak Island, 6 in Bethel, 10 in Nome, 12 in Shishmaref, 6 in Kotzebue, and Barrow looking at a high of 3. 0 in Fort Yukon, Tanana about 5 below, 5 above in Fairbanks with 5 above as well for Eagle, 3 below in Northway and close to Tok, probably colder down the Parks Highway in the teens, South Central, Kenai in the teens and 20s, and Anchorage probably looking at 17. Flying weather now, we expect IFR conditions across the northwest coast, across the eastern interior, and north of the Alaska Range with showers and thunderstorms still possible across the Gulf of Alaska and some of the higher terrain across southeast looking at IFR. By the afternoon, we won't see a whole lot of changes here across the east. The amount of thunderstorms might decrease a little bit more and focus in on southern parts of the outer coast by the afternoon. The eastern interior and areas close to Fairbanks will be looking at IFR conditions, and especially north of the Alaska Range, also around Valdez, Thompson Pass, and the northwestern coast. Let's check your pass conditions now. AKwx Pass, we expect to see MVFR conditions there to start, but some improvements throughout the day. Adigan Pass, we expect to see VFR developing throughout the day. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, look for IFR conditions in the morning with some improvements throughout the afternoon to MVFR. Rainy Pass, we expect to see IFR transitioning toward MVFR throughout the afternoon. Windy Pass may stay at IFR there, especially heading north. You'll find more of that. Isabel Pass, IFR conditions are expected through most of your Wednesday. Mentasta Pass, we expect to see marginal conditions throughout Wednesday. Tanita Pass, more of the same, marginal most of the day. Portage Pass, also looking marginal through most of the day. There may be some IFR in the region, but around Portage Pass, probably marginal. Chilkoot and White Pass, also expected to be IFR through most of your Wednesday. Freezing levels now, not a whole lot of change out west. You can see that recent storm systems have tried to nudge that surface freezing line further and further north, but it's going to be in about the same old place right now. For the Gulf, the 2,000 and 4,000 foot freezing line are really still hovering around the central and northern parts of the Gulf. Yesterday we saw that starting out for this morning a little bit further south, and that has kind of expanded a little bit more to more of the Gulf and southeastern cities like Sitka, Net, and Ketchikan. Probably will be on the south side of that if you're taking off tomorrow. Surface freezing line close to the north and eastern Gulf Coast and Kodiak Island. Icing potential generally above 5,000 feet for the central and eastern interior. For the Gulf communities, it looks like 4,000 to 6,000 feet. 6,000 foot levels there, a little bit closer to southeast and closer to 4,000 feet around Homer and out around Chignik and the northern end of Kodiak Island, Raspberry Island. Out across the west, above 4,000 feet for the western Bering Sea, most of that light to isolated moderate. Low pressure sitting across south central Alaska. With that, we've got a northwesterly wind coming across southwestern Alaska at 50 to 60 knots, but the main superhighway weather is what you see across the north and western Pacific. It's being enhanced by another flow just south of that that's up to 105 knots, and that's what's driving all the weather into the west coast right now. So the main activity is following this southern branch, and the more northerly branch is helping to usher in a little bit of colder weather from the west and over the Bering Sea. At 9,000 feet, a trough of low pressure sitting right across the midsections of Alaska there from north to south. The 30-knot winds are found on the north and westerly trajectory across south central, Cook Inlet, and the northern Gulf. Southeast still looking at a west and southwesterly flow. Generally light, about 20 to 35, and westerlies moving across Kotzebue Sound, 20 to 35. There's southerlies over the north slope, and westerlies over the Bering Sea and the Aleutians around 20 to 25 knots. Northwesterlies for the Alaska Peninsula as well as Bristol Bay. At 3,000 feet, low pressure is really not driving any faster winds across the Aleutians or the Alaska Peninsula at this point, about 20 to 30 knots at best. West and southwesterlies over southeastern Alaska, a little lighter here at 3,000 feet, 10 to 15. 5 to 10 knot winds across south central, light westerlies across the upper Yukon Valley, and slightly stronger northwesterly winds are making an approach to Kotzebue Sound and the northwestern coast at 20 to 30 miles per hour, again all at 3,000 feet. So turbulence, we expect a little bit of chop to start across the western end of the Brooks Range, close to the northern ends of the Kobuk and Noatak valleys there, and across the Chukchi coast around Point Hope, Point Lay, and south of Wainwright, below 4,000 feet. Some of that could reach occasional moderate. Across the western Alaska Range and into the Aleutian Range, and probably close to Cape Newenham, probably occasional moderate would be possible, below 4,000 feet, and you'll see some of that spreading into Shelikof Strait during the afternoon. Across southeast, light to isolated moderate possible across the central and southern parts of southeast, generally below 6,000 feet. And remember, anytime there is thunderstorms in the region, that automatically implies isolated severe turbulence and probably poor visibility close to the vicinity of that storm. So be on your guard for thunderstorm activity in the eastern Gulf, closer to southeastern Alaska tomorrow. Let's look at your aviation forecast. I'll be back with a look at the sea ice update as well as your marine weather here in just a few minutes. Stay tuned.
There are many different types of aircraft being used in Southeast Alaska. Air commerce here is utilized the way the rest of the U.S. uses taxis, buses, and trucks. Helicopters and float planes are the most widely used aircraft. However, fixed gear and retractable gear aircraft are found in most Alaskan fleets. Be sure to monitor a local radio frequency at all times and make frequent position reports. It's important that you file a flight plan and stick to it. Then, if an emergency landing is imminent, the radio is already set to make a report. Be aware that several large air carriers land at Ketchikan, Wrangell, Petersburg, Sitka, Gustavus, and Juneau. Having good communication and keeping vigilant can save you from becoming a near mid-air collision, or NMAC statistic. The vortices that are generated by these large aircraft can cause a smaller aircraft to be forced onto the runway during landing or departure. To avoid wake turbulence, try landing beyond the larger aircraft's touchdown point and take off prior to their rotation point. It's best to wait the recommended 3 to 5 minutes for wake turbulence abatement. If the tower does not make a recommendation for a wait for wake turbulence abatement, the pilot should make the request. While on cross-country flights, plot your course on the chart. Keep a close track of where you are at all times. It's easy for one inlet or bay to look very much like another. Pilotage is a skill that is alive and well in Alaska. Navigation aids are few and far between, and a GPS should only be used as a backup for the chart and pilotage. As a reminder, there are no GPS instrument approaches in Southeast Alaska at this time. Remember that alternating or flashing landing lights are unique to Alaska's aviation community. They are used to enhance visibility of aircraft in flight. A word of caution: remain within gliding distance of the shore when at all possible. The water is very cold, even in the summer. In the event of a forced water landing, the chances of survival are very slim due to hypothermia. Weather changes rapidly, and often the changes are not forecast. Making a 180-degree turn and a precautionary landing at the first available landing area, even a beach, can save your life. Pilots often wait out bad weather at an outlying strip or beach. You should always be prepared to lay over until better weather arrives. If the wind is blowing, chances are the skies will be clear, but the ride bumpy. Wind can be seen on the water in the form of whitecaps. This indicates that the water could be too rough for landing a float plane. It's wise to call flight service prior to departure to see what the surface conditions will be at your intended airport destination. As the saying goes, if you don't like the weather here, just wait 10 minutes. The 60 nautical mile trip to Haines from Juneau is fairly straightforward. One noteworthy item is the lack of beaches in the area. The slope of the mountains continues to the bottom of the canal, causing small rocky outcroppings in most areas. Flying up the Lynn Canal to Chilkat Inlet is the preferred route to Haines. The Lynn Canal has several prominent reporting points that are used by the local operators and private pilots. After departing Juneau to the west, you should fly to the right side of Lynn Canal, close to the land mass. Utilize the hemispheric rule for determining your flying altitude. The first prominent departure reporting points are Lena Point, T Harbor, Eagle Beach, and Benjamin Island.
But wait, there's more tomorrow. Today's sea ice edge, well, you can see decent thickness and concentration across the north. We're really focused on the concentration here with the colors, though, and you'll notice that there are more expanding areas of ice across the Chukchi Sea, around Norton Sound and around the southwestern coast and the YK Delta once again. That due to colder temperatures and northerly winds pushing that cold southward. So watch for ice to very gradually expand westward if this trend continues. Now, across Cook Inlet, here is, let's see if we can find it here, right about here. Here's Calgon Island. And all this here in Cook Inlet has pretty much made its way up to about 80% concentration. So as we know, the ice is very close to, if not touching, Calgon Island as of today. You can get the very latest information at weather.gov/anchorage/ice. And when you go there, you can use a map that you can zoom in and find all the favorite places that you want to check out, whether it's on the southwest coast and Cook Inlet or on the northwest coast there. Check thickness and concentration and get a forecast as well as the seasonal outlook. Again, that's at weather.gov/anchorage/ice from our trusty Alaska Sea Ice team. Now, southeastern Alaska is looking at lighter winds in recent days, so here's a southwesterly push that's still bringing rain into the outer coast, and that risk of isolated thunderstorms tonight and into tomorrow as that threat will shift a little bit further south. In the inside waters, you're looking at 15 to 20 knots with a 4 to 5 foot seas. Southerlies inside of the Clarence Strait at 20 knots. Lynn Canal, 4 foot seas there on that southerly flow. For Thursday, a southwesterly flow continues from Sitka down toward the Dixon entrance, but southeasterlies take over from Cross Sound and northward up toward Yakutat. Southeasterlies on the inside, 20 to 25 with 4 to 5 foot seas there in the Lynn Canal. Again, we're looking at 5 foot seas on the 25 knot wind. For south central, light northerlies coming down Cook Inlet and sea ice free waters. That's 2 foot seas for you. Northerlies south of Calgon Island on a 15 knot wind. Northwesterlies crossing the Barrens and Kodiak Island, 20 to about 30 knots with 6 foot seas inside of Shelikof Strait, 8 foot seas west of the Barrens, and 11 to 13 foot seas in the western Gulf with light winds and small seas inside of Prince William Sound, a southeasterly wind once you get outside of Montague Island. For Thursday, northerlies take over Prince William Sound and continue to push into the northern Gulf at 15 to 20 knots. Northwesterlies across the western Gulf at 30 knots with 7 to 10 foot seas. And you'll see a northwesterly flow inside of Shelikof Strait, a 5 foot sea there. Light and variable flow across the northern Cook Inlet regions and south of Calgon Island, 15 knots with a 3 foot sea. In Bristol Bay, a northwesterly wind will be one of many places looking at that northwest flow. 35 knots inside of the bay at 9 foot seas are expected. 14 to 15 foot seas on the Pacific coast, also looking at 30 to 35 knot winds. As we get into Thursday, a little bit of a change for Bristol Bay. A light wind from the east, 10 knots with a 3 foot sea. Otherwise, west and northwesterly flow across the Alaska Peninsula. 7 to 8 foot seas on the southern end with 11 foot seas from Castle Cape to Chignik with a 35 knot wind there on Thursday. Westerlies for the central and western chain. Conditions look pretty nice compared to where they were a few days ago. 7 to 10 foot seas expected for many areas with 11 to 12 foot seas across the central and eastern Pacific coastline there for Wednesday. For Thursday, look for a southerly flow across the central chain. Southeasterlies will be light from Adak to Kiska with a 30 knot wind and 8 foot seas. Westerlies a little bit further out than that. West and southwesterlies for the central and eastern chain. Looking at 20 knots with a 7 to 8 foot sea on the Bering Sea coast and 8 to 9 foot seas on the Pacific coast for your Thursday. North and westerlies down the west coast, 15 to 30 knots there. Winds really pick up after they pass Nunivak Island. 30 knots with a 7 foot sea there. Southerlies a little bit further west. This is all working around a ridge of high pressure. 6 foot seas from St. Matthew down to the Pribilofs with 15 knot winds around St. Paul and St. George, becoming 20 knots from the south and west as you get into Thursday. Northeasterlies oppose that from St. Lawrence Island, 3 foot seas there, and heavy freezing spray will be a possibility both days. Southerlies on either side of Nunivak Island and into the Kuskokwim Delta, 20 knots with a 5 foot sea there for your Thursday. Now for the north slope, light westerlies for the Beaufort Seacoast over the ice, 10 knots expected there. West and southwesterlies work into the Chukchi coast at 25 knots, a southerly wind blowing off of Barrow and Wainwright at around 20 knots. For Thursday, the westerlies continue into Kotzebue Sound and around Cape Lisburne to Point Lay, 25 knots from the south and west, and southerlies from Barrow to Prudhoe Bay and out toward Kaktovik, 15 to 20. Here's a recap of tonight's weather. No watches, warnings, or advisories to pass on to you. There will be some more snow across the interior, and places like Fairbanks may see some of that. You may see rain and maybe an occasional thunderclap across southeastern Alaska with isolated thunderstorms offshore. There have been several thunderstorms this afternoon that were giving way to lightning strikes from time to time. Remember your safety rules and stay inside if that's happening. Across South Central, snow showers generally to the west of Cook Inlet and riding up through the Alaska Range and into the eastern and northern sections of the interior. And another wave of colds trying to get its act together across the Chukchi Sea and drop southward toward the northwestern coast. Once that happens, another northerly push will move through, bringing colder wind for sure, but we're watching that to make sure that we know where the sea ice is going there on that northerly push, and north-facing communities should do the same. Watching for some higher concentration ice that could be pushed towards some of your communities there, like Shishmaref and the northwestern Chukchi coast. Out across the west, weather remains unsettled, but not quite as organized as it once was earlier this week. As we get into Thursday, a ridge of high pressure slides eastward that will lock in some cold and probably areas of fog across the interior valleys there in southwest. Snow showers possible across the southwestern coast and the northwestern coast, with continued rain and kind of sloppy weather for southeast and the northern Gulf Coast heading into Thursday. Thanks for watching. See you again tomorrow.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Alyeska Pipeline Service Company, sustaining Alaska's pipeline and its operations today and into the future.